iOS 26 is the biggest visual refresh of iPhone software since 2013. While there's been tweaks over the years, not since iOS 7 has there been this drastic of a change to how iOS looks on your iPhone. But in addition to the liquid glass redesign, iOS 26 does bring a host of new features that are significant improvements, but there are a lot of compromises too. Let's take a deep look at liquid glass, how it compares to the previous iOS 18, what is improved, and maybe what has taken a step back. What are the new features that will actually bring quality of life improvements? And now that I've had it on my main iPhone for over a month, is iOS 26 actually good? Welcome to my iOS 26 full review. Back in June, I had the opportunity to attend WWDC in person, where Apple announced that all of its operating systems are changing to the 26 nomenclature, and a significant portion of the keynote was dedicated to liquid glass, Apple's new design scheme across all their operating systems. But what does it feel like using day to day? Like I mentioned, I've had it on my main iPhone for about a month, and depending on what app and what you're doing on your phone, it can look great, and sometimes I think it can be a little distracting. And I'll be comparing it to iOS 18 throughout this video to show the differences. When you first unlock your phone, you'll notice everything looks a little different. Icons shimmer a little more, and Apple stock icons have all been updated for liquid glass. To see an even more significant change, you can customize your home screen and change all the icons to have that glass effect, either dark or light mode, and of course you still have the tinting options. There's also been some recent additions like matching the tint to your phone color or even your iPhone case. By the way, get subscribed because Monday, September 15th, iOS 26 will be available for everyone, and I'm going to share the top 10 features you should try when you first update. I'll stick with the default icons for now, and you can see lots of places throughout the OS where there's more transparency and that glassy edges. Control Center was one of the most contentious places for the redesign, as it might have been very distracting at first, but I find how they tweak Control Center in the end to be just fine. I can see all my controls, and you still see the home screen behind it. Keep in mind, if you really wanted to, you can go into the accessibility settings and display, and then reduce transparency. And that's going to turn off a lot of the liquid glass effects, and then things like Control Center will completely black out the background. Personally, I choose to keep this off. You'll also notice lots of details around the OS, like these toggles. Everything from the new shape, more of an oblong rather than a circle, and the little animations every time you tap something. You can see the toggle gets larger and you have the little glass effect around it. Just for comparison, these were the toggles from iOS 18 and earlier. I'll be honest, I think I preferred the perfect circle toggles, and this also felt a little faster for some reason. Having that animation with the glass effect around it just feels like it takes a half second longer. And this will be a recurring theme, but I do feel like liquid glass is form over function at times. But there's also lots of places around the OS where liquid glass looks really nice. It's a fresh, modern take, and that transparency can have a fun look. For instance, if you're in the music app and you start scrolling, you'll see that under the play bar and then the search and browse button, that everything showing through the glass shimmers and honestly looks fun. Now, once again, I do feel like you sacrifice a little form over function, because if you wanted to get to your library or navigate to a different tab here in Apple Music, you do need to tap this and then tap somewhere in the tab. We can compare this to iOS 18, which had the mini player right here, but the tabs were always visible, and you could always tap them no matter what was going on screen. Is one additional tap a big deal? Maybe not, but it is trading off a bit of utility for the looks. Another place to see that liquid glass effect is in something like the Apple TV app, where as you scroll the different movies and show posters, they'll show through slightly on this glass tab bar at the bottom. And so while the visual might be appealing, there are times where it feels like those animations are a little unfinished. For instance, something simple like swiping down for the notification center. In iOS 18, as you swipe down, you'll see that the home page is actually blurred out as you're swiping down. So they get obscured and you can see your notifications even if you're midway pulling down that notification banner. On iOS 26, as you pull it down, there is no obscuring those icons or home screen until you get to the very bottom. So if you were to hold the lock screen or notifications like this, you get some weird effects. There is still glass, and you can see your lock screen widgets and time, but this just feels a little unfinished. When you finally let go at the bottom, your icons and home screen blow away, and then swiping up, you don't see anything until that lock screen disappears again. But if we compared it to iOS 18, this feels like a more natural progression of blurring out that home screen, and if I slowly swipe up, you also see everything being revealed as you pull up that tray or drawer. I think a lot of the visuals and animations are nice. The only time it really feels to get in the way is when I'm trying to navigate a certain app. So like music, an app I spend a lot of time in is Apple Podcasts, and if I was listening to an episode, you'll see that mini player down here at the bottom, but the tabs are not persistent, like in Apple Music. So here in iOS 18, no matter where you were listening to something, the tabs are always there, you could always navigate back and forth, but here on iOS 26, you're one more tap away from navigating between those. Is it a big deal? No, but just something I noticed using it over the last several weeks. Now, one place I feel that iOS 26 knocked it out of the park when it comes to design is the lock screen. I think glass effects on the lock screen look really good, especially things like the Now Player here, but what's even more visually appealing is what you can do with the clock and then spatial scenes. For instance, I have this wallpaper, which I use on the weekend, and being able to expand the clock and having it overlap or having the wallpaper overlap the clock, depending on what image you choose, I really like this look. I think it looks great. But even better are spatial scenes. So you can choose a photo that will have depth effect, and then once it's your lock screen, moving it around with enlarging the clock gives you a 3D effect that I think looks great. Any photo, whether there's people or not, you can make into a spatial scene, and you can have some really visually compelling lock screens. To do that, just create a new lock screen on your phone, choose a photo, one with people preferably, and you'll see the spatial scene button right here. Tap that, and you'll immediately see that the clock and other elements have now changed or overlapped, and then once it's set, you can move it around, but it looks like I'm looking into the display. That's pretty wild. Now it's even layered the clock behind my son on top of the background. It looks great. Another big redesign in iOS 26 is the camera app. And I think this is another place where it gets it really right. I've seen lots of people using the iPhone camera in public, and I can tell it can be confusing, especially with all these options down at the bottom, not knowing whether you should tap or swipe around. Many people don't know you can just swipe on the screen to move between it. But the new camera app in iOS 26 makes it very clear. You can switch between video, you can switch to photo, and then once you're in that mode, you can swipe over and do things like spatial and portrait mode. Now, some elements are a little more hidden. For instance, you can tap photo down here and you have more options like live, flash, or night mode. In iOS 18, those things were a little more obvious, although you still get those small icons in the upper right, even in iOS 26. And one thing I do really like about the iOS 26 camera is you have more access to formats directly in the camera. For instance, if you went over to video, if you wanted to change the frame rate, you typically had to go over into settings, change them there, and then come back to the camera app. In iOS 26, you have much faster access to different frame rate options, log, HDR, 4K, and more. Now, back when my Pro Max was on iOS 18, there was a one tap for RAW Max photos, and so that is one additional tap away, but not too bad. Another big improvement in iOS 26 are the contextual menus in various apps. For instance, if I were to select text here in Notes, previously, you would have to scroll to the right and maybe do that many times to get to the action you wanted. Now when you tap that right arrow, you get a much nicer contextual menu with iconography showing you all the options. This is much faster to navigate and much better than iOS 18. You can see here in iOS 18, when you tap that right arrow, you would get a few more options, but you might have to tap that 3 or 4 times to get to the option you wanted. And I'm also a fan of the new iconography that you'll see in those contextual menus and in the share sheet. Let's say you're in Safari and you wanted to share a web page. Number one, the share button is one more tap away if you're in the default tab view here. But when you looked into that share sheet, the icons were okay, they were small and often to the right. But if you choose to share now with iOS 26, first you get much larger buttons here at the top of the share sheet. So you could program for favorite actions, like if you wanted to do a shortcut, and the icons are a little larger and moved over to the left. I think this actually helps with visual distinction, finding the action you want or the shortcut, and getting to it quickly. It took me a while to get used to having these large icons above the share sheet, but once I moved some of my favorite shortcuts up here for quick access, I really prefer this. Next, if you have Apple Intelligence on your iPhone, which every iPhone 16 and 17 has it, and the 15 Pro, visual intelligence has been greatly improved. For instance, maybe there's a date on screen. This could be in an email or a text message. Yes, you could tap this. Not always is it tappable like that, especially if you see something in Safari. But the nice thing is with visual intelligence, now when you take a screenshot, which you can program to minimize down here or go into this full screen mode by default, visual intelligence is going to automatically recognize things that are on screen. And if there's a date, you'll see the add to calendar automatically. Again, whether it was plain text or something from an image, maybe you saw it on social media, and then you can quickly add it to your calendar in this visual intelligence view. And you basically have circle to search now built in with Apple Intelligence. So if you see a product or an image, go into the screenshot mode, and then just circling it like this, I don't have to do anything else, it's actually going to do a reverse image search through Google or ChatGPT. I can swipe up to see results, and you'll get that reverse Google image search right here. That is my new green leather case with Andar. If you're getting an iPhone 17 Pro or Pro Max, you should definitely grab it. Beard.fm/case. And of course, you can launch visual intelligence with the camera button with a double click if you want to identify some plants or animals. But also, if you have a picture with some text in it, maybe you took a picture of a book page or an article, visual intelligence will also give you that summarize option when it detects a lot of text. And you can get that summary right here, whether you're taking a screenshot of something you see on your phone or you used visual intelligence to take a picture. Overall, I think visual intelligence has become a more powerful feature, especially over the last few months. Next, we need to talk about Safari. Safari's been redesigned multiple times over the years, moving the tab bar from the top to the bottom, and now with Liquid Glass, it's changed again. You can see as I swipe down, that tab bar immediately became transparent. So it is in that glassy effect. If I start swiping through this website, it shrinks even further, and you get that nice effect of the colors or whatever is behind it showing through. If it's on a lighter background, you might see it kind of fill out or become more opaque, and then when it's over colors and such, it has that glass feel. Now, to be fair, iOS 18 also shrunk that address bar when you would start scrolling on a website, but anytime you started scrolling up or wanted to see it, it was very opaque. I think that's fine. The bigger adjustment I had to make was rather than have access to all my tabs, bookmarks, and the share button quickly right here under the address bar, those things are a couple more taps away. To share, you do have to tap the 3 buttons and then share, but you can also swipe up to access all your tabs. Apparently that was something you could have done already in iOS 18, but it's a gesture I had to become more accustomed with so I could quickly access it without 2 taps. Now you can change how the address bar functions in iOS 26. You'll see here there's actually 3 options for the tab bar as opposed to the 2 back from iOS 18. And if you want it to look more like it did, you can have that look. It still has more rounded corners and edges, but you get the share button, tabs, and bookmarks back. Frankly, I've gotten used to having the smaller tab bar, and I do like how it's more discreet and allows me to see more of the web page even when it's active. I actually did a deep dive video all about Safari on iOS 26, how to use all the new features, and how to navigate it really efficiently. You can watch that video right up here, and I'll link it in the description. Let's go into a little bit of rapid fire review. The Apple Podcast app, in addition to that tab bar and overall redesign, actually has some new features. So when you're on the now playing screen, you can tap the playback speed and you actually have the option to go all the way up to 3x. Previously 2x was the maximum, but if you want to go wild, you can go all the way to the hair side and have that 3x speed. You'll also see the new feature, Enhanced Dialogue. That means no matter how the podcast might be mixed or edited, that will help you hear the voices more clearly, bring it forward. I've actually heard from a lot of podcasters, longtime listeners, really appreciate that enhanced dialogue feature. You'll also notice shows that have custom episode artwork, like my podcast, Primary Technology. New episodes every Thursday on YouTube and in Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow above or down in the description. iOS 26 now has that full bleed episode artwork rather than the artwork being small and contained. I've come to really like this. I think if a podcast creator spends the time making custom episode artwork, having this even larger and showing it off when someone's navigating is a thumbs up. And I also like some of the visual tweaks that Apple has made, like with the little play, you can see how many minutes are left, as opposed to just the big play pause button here from iOS 18. More obvious actions like bookmarking and download. Overall, I think the podcast app has been improved. I'm still not sure if I want the tab bar visual at all times, or if I'm good with it just appearing when I swipe up to the top, but I'm going to give the podcast app a thumbs up. Now, there's actually a bunch of new features for AirPods in iOS 26. And one of the most useful is this warning that it's time to charge your AirPods. So when your AirPods Pro case is low, I found this notification appeared once it went under 20% for the case and the AirPods, is a super useful notification. But that's not the only new AirPods feature. When you connect your AirPods with your iPhone in iOS 26, you can jump into those AirPods settings right here, and you can do things like use your AirPods as a camera remote, tapping the stem to start a video recording or take a picture, and this wild feature that will pause music or podcasts when you fall asleep. Wearing your AirPods and you're drifting off to sleep, your Apple Watch and AirPods will be able to detect when you're asleep and pause. That's wild. Next, you'll notice in a lot of screens, especially settings and Apple's default apps, that the search bar has moved to the bottom. I think this is a welcome change. Before, you had to swipe down to even see the search bar. So if you were on iOS 18, I think most users probably didn't even know that search was an option. You had to swipe down to reveal it. But in iOS 26, it's persistently there at the bottom. So if you were to go into Mail, the search bar is now at the bottom. Messages, you'll see it down here as well. And even in things like Notes, you'll see it here at the bottom as well. Faster to access, more discoverable. I think that's a great update. Also, it won't be something you might experience right away, but there are a ton of phone options like Hold Assist and more screening options here in the phone app. All of this granular control about who can actually ring your phone, whether or not you want to hear the name of the person and why they're calling. That's the Ask Reason to Calling setting. These features are great. I've used them over the last several weeks, especially the Hold Assist, which will detect when you're on hold and then offer to send you a notification when it's time to return to the call. All of these are great. 2 thumbs up for those. Messages also has a ton of new welcome features, not only wallpapers and conversations, polls, but there's better filtering options. You can see a place for transactions. Spam detection is going to be even better and actually will help train Apple's models to detect spam across all iPhones. That happens privately and securely. And you can also manage filtering of your text messages. Again, 2 thumbs up for the messages and phone screening and spam filtering. Also, Apple definitely had creators in mind when it added features for choosing your audio input, something I've asked for years, and the new local capture. So if you wanted to do a FaceTime and you and the other person still gets a high quality local recording, you can do that built into your iPhone. But what's even better is if you use an app like Riverside to record a podcast, audio, or video, when you go in to actually record something, once your iPhone actually detects that you want to use the microphone, you can swipe down in the control center, tap up here where you have the microphone and camera settings, and you get to manually choose and dictate what the audio input is. So I have this Shure MV7 Plus microphone connected to my iPhone. You'll see that as an option. And as someone who creates podcasts and videos, I really like to know that whatever I'm about to record is using the microphone I intend. Plus, you can use Apple's features like voice isolation and set all of that from this screen. 2 thumbs up for creator tools, things like audio input and local recording. Some other great features came to Apple Music. Number 1, Apple Music on the lock screen is wonderful. When you're playing a song like this, you can actually tap on the artwork here and it will make it full screen. But what's even better is when an album has that animated artwork and you go to your lock screen, it's actually going to completely take over with the animation actually visible. When it comes to liquid glass and redesign, this is one of the best things about it. But Apple Music also has a really cool feature called Auto Mix. When you first update your iPhone to iOS 26, you'll have the option to turn this on, and I recommend you do. You can also go to the Music app settings, and under Song Transitions, you'll see Auto Mix. After listening to some tracks like this, it's pretty great. It seamlessly will mix in between songs, and it actually does a really good job, even when songs are in different keys. And lastly, Apple Music gets lyric translation, so even if you're listening to music in other languages, you can see your language translation right underneath. Super cool. Maps also got a big visual redesign. Frankly, I like it. Some of the buttons are larger, which makes it easier when you're driving to have tap targets. And when you swipe up from the tray, you get big icons over here, big numbers about your arrival time, how far away you are from your destination, and really easy ways to report an incident directly from your iPhone. Little visual refreshes like in Mail I think are welcome. Looks nice, search bar at the bottom. Files not only got that liquid glass redesign, but there are some power features here like changing the default app to open with, and you can see that redesigned contextual menu as well. Highly recommend if you started downloading images to files and every time you tapped on one, it opened the Preview app, which is a new app on iPhone and iPad. You can actually change that by tapping and holding, going to Open With, and changing that to Preview with Quick Look. That's how I prefer it because if I tap an image, I just want to see it real quick on my phone, and then save it to my photos or set it as wallpaper. But that option to open with, especially other file types like audio or video files, is great. You can choose your default app right here. The Wallet app also got features like being able to save credit card info, including expiration date and security codes in the Wallet app. This way you can reference it later. And I won't have time to go into all of it, but Shortcuts got a massive update with Apple Intelligence Actions, automations on the Mac, and you get the liquid glass redesign on that tab bar as well. Now get subscribed because I'm going to be talking about Apple Intelligence shortcuts in its own video, giving you 20 plus new shortcuts specifically for iOS 26 and the new Apple Intelligence actions. But overall, I think iOS 26 brings really welcome features, and some of them are just clear quality life improvement features like the call screening and hold assist. Small changes like moving the search box to the bottom and making it more visible in every app is a plus. Visual Intelligence and AirPods got some great new features, and visuals like the lock screen, whether it's Apple Music animation or using the new spatial scenes feature, are all visually beautiful. And I think that's the real story. iOS 26 is beautiful in many ways with some rough edges. Not the edges of the liquid glass, but in some of the animations, pulling down the notification drawer. Sometimes in certain apps it feels a little slower compared to iOS 18 because of that animation. But with the feature additions and the overall visual appeal, I do think iOS 26 is an improvement over iOS 18. It does take a little bit of time to get used to liquid glass. If you really wanted to, you can go into the accessibility settings and reduce transparency, and it will look similar to iOS 18. It won't be as fun, and you will miss some of those visual animations, but those options are there for you. And as a side note, I actually find liquid glass as a redesign works really well in watchOS 26. For some reason, I think the small screen with some of those animations and buttons makes it even more fun to use the Apple Watch. But if you want a review of watchOS 26 and the new features there, let me know down in the comments. And if you have any questions or thoughts about liquid glass, I'd love to hear them. Drop them below, and also get subscribed and hit that like button, because I have a review of macOS Tahoe coming tomorrow if you're watching this when this video came out, or you'll also find that in my iOS 26 playlist. I also have a video showing 100 plus new features in iOS 26, so if you want to see everything that's new, like literally everything, you can check out that video right up here. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you enjoyed this kind of format and review style video, because I think I'd like to do more of them, but I'd like to hear from you too. So again, thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.